Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you on the paradox of tolerance. This is going to be a multi-game video today. We're starting off with Call of Duty, of course, but we'll be transitioning to other shooters and games as I move through. I'm looking a little bit crazier than normal right now because I just finished exercising again, exercising pretty much every single day before hitting the beach in Gamers Bay, Cayman. And we're going to be talking about something that I know for a fact a lot of you have heard of or discussed amongst yourselves, but likely haven't heard the official name of it, which is the tolerance paradox. It's actually a very old concept that originated in the 1940s during World War II and would later continue to develop during the Civil Rights Movement. And I'm going to try to break it down in very simple terms like this. You ask yourself a question: can a society be tolerant if it doesn't tolerate intolerant people? And for now, let's just assume, for the sake of this video, that most people think tolerance is a good thing, and that some people in that group have decided to be very tolerant and pride themselves on just how tolerant they can be. They can be the most tolerant, cultured person on the world. Personally, I think this is virtue signaling, but to their credit, these people put up with a lot of weird and interesting situations. We would then ask, can a super tolerant person tolerate intolerant individuals? Mostly they cannot do so because it's the opposite of their personal moral values. It's hard to tolerate something that's literally the exact opposite of yourself. And if there's any group that you don't tolerate, or in this case they don't tolerate, including intolerant people, then they themselves are intolerant to some degree and are not fully tolerant. So it forces you to become the opposite of what you want to be in this paradox. Let's move it up one more level, do a little bit big picture now, and talk about society as a whole. And let's just assume that most of us live in the West, which by global standards are tolerant, progressive societies. What happens when these societies choose to tolerate intolerant people? What if they're so tolerant they can tolerate the intolerant? And the best examples I can make of this would be like allowing neo-Nazis, Klansmen, or Nation of Islam, by which many of you are probably not familiar with. It's like an offshoot that's black people only, and they have these weird racial beliefs that all whites are devils. And look up Nation of Islam if you're bored. It's like a cult, and they're crazy to say the least. But imagine allowing all of these, let's say, unpleasant types of people to have equal say at events, to respect them, to try to understand their beliefs, and ultimately to accept them. And this is where the second part of the paradox comes in, which is quite simply that societies that tolerate intolerant groups are ultimately overtaken and destroyed by those groups, at least according to Karl Popper, who coined this term, was its first researcher, and is the source of most of my information today. He has a very nice quote that says, "If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of intolerance, then tolerance itself will be destroyed." And this is, well, it's complicated and it's busy. So society now finds itself in a weird place. It can choose to be intolerant to some degree of other groups or intolerant people, or it can be tolerant, but it runs a huge risk of getting overrun by extreme intolerance or hate groups. And if you choose to be intolerant, to set some standards or line in the sand for yourself, then you also have to accept that your society is going to be at least a little bit unjust, because if it's intolerant, then it can't be fair, and if it can't be fair, it can't be just. Mr. Popper, who invented this and is my source for most of this today, believed that the paradox had a relatively simple solution. It was, you can still be tolerant if you don't tolerate intolerance, because you can't be the opposite of yourself. It's like being a square circle or a black-white. If you want to be the whitest you can white, you can't be black. If you want to be the reddest you can red, you can't be blue, because then you're not yourself. And he thinks it's perfectly acceptable to not tolerate intolerant people. In bigger terms, what he meant is that society as a whole should be free and willing to sort of draw a line in the sand, to really just lay it out there and say, this is what we tolerate, this is what we don't, and separate the two and make it known pretty well. And in this case, he was primarily talking about not tolerating intolerant people, but also a little bit about fringe beliefs and junk science and dangerous stuff like that as a whole. And he believed you can still be a progressive society by not tolerating intolerant groups. However, the person who came up with this idea had some more extreme beliefs, which would be less popular, and those would be that intolerance needs to be shut down at all cost, even saying that it's acceptable to use violence, fists, guns, or potential censorship of freedom of speech to stop an intolerant person from spreading their dangerous message. This was not popular then, and of course with many of you it wouldn't be popular now. Later in life, he really wanted to clarify this, or in my personal opinion, I think he was changing his mind a little bit. He instead wanted to say that it was a misunderstanding. What I meant by being violent and censoring people didn't apply to intolerant people, but rather he wanted to redefine intolerance roughly as some person or group that wants to shut down free discourse or shut down discourse they don't believe in, and the actual ideas don't matter. So he didn't actually care about racism or bigotry or like quack science or whatever, but rather his view of intolerance was any person, any group that just wants to completely shut down a group. Like if it doesn't agree with you, I don't want to hear it, groupthink to the maximum, can't do this, can't brain on it, no, and do anything to not have it going on. So it's acceptable to kill the ideas of people that want to kill other people's ideas. Just a little paradoxical to me. And now we're reaching the end of this short video. There's no great solution here for you at the end of the video. No words of wisdom, no perfect philosophical thing that I've thought of, because it's a paradox. There's no answer. Today, what you've done is you've learned about an ongoing balance in society, the paradox that keeps us afloat and progressing and safe in some ways, and I've given all of you some good food for thought about any of your future actions and beliefs. So I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.